Hi, Rose.
Hi, Cora.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. I know we were just chatting about it a little bit, but I'm just so excited to talk about food and sustainability and how intrinsically I know that we both feel these things are connected. So, for those who may not be so familiar with you, can you just kind of start by giving us a little bit of a background on yourself and sort of how you ended up as a nutritionist, really?
Yeah, so I was a model for a long time. I don't really know. I tell you where it came from actually, is my family. My grandmother was one of the first owners of a health food shop in the country. And so I've been around alternative and holistic and complementary medicine my whole life. You know, my mother is a kinesiologist, my stepdad's a homeopath. And so that's how I grew up. I grew up with alternative medicine. And so then I was a model for a long time, a really long time. And I guess it's funny because I think I was burning the candle at both ends. I started definitely working out that actually what I put in, if I had a big night out, what I put in the next day would be helpful to my recovery. And also, I traveled a lot. I mean, never mind that, I traveled and I worked really hard. So I started, and also the fashion industry is quite food forward. So they're always like I really remember trying quinoa for the first time in New York in the 90s and being like, what is this thing? So I think that also sort of like lured me in with the alternative foods and what food could do for you. And then I think having a child, I've got 3 girls now, and they're quite grown up now. My oldest is 20, which is the single most aging thing that I have. Stop making her lie about her age soon. But I have a 13, a 14, and a 20-year-old. And I think when you start being responsible for what goes in someone's mouth, you are solely responsible for what they eat. It becomes quite a big thing. So all of that was a perfect storm for me to go, I'm a worker, I like working, and I had 3 kids and I was 31 and I was just like, I want to be at home for them. So I can't go back to modeling so much. And so I went back to school. And I went back to nutrition. It took me 2 years to get up to going back to school. I was like, oh, shan't I? Don't know. And it was literally like being back at school. I was like, oh my God, like assignments and homework and stress and like having tantrums about it. And yeah, so that's what I did. And then so that was when I was 32, 10 years ago, I guess. So and then I qualified 10 years ago and have been doing nutrition and naturopathy ever since.
Well, and that's amazing. And I feel like, in the past decade, really, I feel like there's been this like wellness explosion, and all of a sudden we're all kind of thinking about it. But something that I kind of wanted to kick off with as like a general question, and something that I struggle with actually personally, is like, we hear so much noise now about things like veganism, plant-based, superfoods, organic, local, keto, it's like the list goes on and on and on. And I think that can be really confusing for people. So how have you sort of defined what wellness means to you, and sort of how have you created your food philosophy that you think works in like a sustainable way?
So I think I quite the food fads or food, I quite like them just because they're quite exciting. Because I love it. Do you know what? It's an exciting time for me to do what I do. That everybody's really into it. So everywhere I go, but it's a lot. There's a lot of information out there, and I think for me to cut through the noise with people who are not experts in this field, I think wellness is to do with what makes you feel well. When it comes to food, it's not rocket science. When it comes to what makes you well food wise, it is definitely not rocket science. It is literally, you eat more fruit, you eat more veg, you eat more fiber, you eat more whole grains, you eat fresh when you can, you eat organic when it's really not rocket science. If you're getting specific, like you're going down a keto path or any of those sort of things, then that's more specific and you need to be a bit more educated to do that well. I'm not a big fan of, in general, everyday life, I'm not a big fan of extreme. I think any extreme, whether that is extreme overeating or extreme undereating, like anorexia or obesity, or extreme eating plan, like just like a keto diet where you're not eating any vegetables. I'm not a fan of any of those, really. I think it's just, it's like I said, it's not rocket science. It's well balanced. I think you have to have a bit of fun. I think it's all about balance. I can't, I like to have a good night out sometimes, but I like to take care of myself. And, earlier we were talking about small steps, and I think keeping those small steps, taking care of yourself, they help you encourage you to do more things that help you feel well, and so do a little bit of exercise, have a green juice, all those little things help you to get to feel well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like something that you really focus on, we were also chatting about, is this idea of gut health. And I think that is another just rabbit hole of like, kind of misinformation, misunderstanding, confusion. And also, I think what's really interesting is the fact that gut health isn't always just based on nutrition. And I think, this is something that's really interesting given the time that we're living in, because we finally, the vast majority of us have the time to really think about how to be well going forward. And if we are going to focus on the gut and kind of keeping things right at the root of the problem or the solution, how would you kind of say, looking at the issues that attack our gut and also heal our gut, how would you approach something like that?
So yeah, the gut is a bit more. Because when I see people in clinic, the gut is often the root cause. It's one of the drivers for what's going on wrong somewhere else. So like we were talking about the immune system, or gut-brain axis is really, really well known. So people with depression or neurotransmitter problems, people who are anxious. Anxious is a really key relation to the gut, and so. So I think keeping the gut well, the things that you could do without I think seeing somebody who knows what they're talking about is really crucial in these. When people spend fortunes on supplements, they don't know why. Sometimes it's cheaper to go and see someone who can tell you, or you can get tested. Do a stool sample and get do a comprehensive stool analysis. But I think the things that you definitely want to look at are the foods you eat. You can eat pre and probiotic foods. So prebiotic foods are things like onions, fennel, leeks, all those sort of foods. And then probiotic foods are sauerkrauts, kombuchas, kefirs, those sort of, which I think everybody's heard about probably now.
Yeah.
And I think doing a probiotic course twice a year is really important. And if you have antibiotics, make sure that you're doing a probiotic course after those antibiotics every single time.
Yeah.
And money on the probiotics, but you need to have a good probiotic. It's definitely worth spending money on a good probiotic.
But you would say only like twice a year. It's not something that we should be taking, because I think that's really, it almost can seem very prohibitive when it needs to be something that you're doing like 365 days a year.
Yeah, I mean, so we're all unique. All our microbiomes are completely unique. So the idea that you can buy a off-the-shelf probiotic, no matter how good it is, that fits everybody, doesn't make sense to me. And so you can put those bacteria in, and they will help the rest of the colony balance. Hopefully it will keep off it will help your immune system. It will keep away the bad pathogens. It will keep the bad bacteria away, and it will stimulate your good colony, your bacterial colony, your microbiome. And so I prefer my clients to do that twice a year, and then the rest of the time let their colony do its thing. If somebody has a really noticeable time when a really noticeable shift, a negative shift when they're off probiotics, then I would sort of look at perhaps that being a time when you'd give somebody 365 days a year. The rest of the time I don't think so. And also, people don't comply when they're doing it every day. If they're focused for 3 months, a month, then they tend to do it. Then they don't. Then they sort of tails off, and then they forget, and then they start doing something else. And so then that's another reason as well.
Yeah, so just kind of more targeted. And then going back to that idea of the brain gut axis. So I know that I think people are aware of it, but I also think that we don't always recognize just how strong that is. And I think we're living in a time where I feel like we're balancing between really big anxiety about the current situation, loved ones, the wellness and health of the population, but also, ironically, also feeling maybe less stressed than ever before and having more time to like exercise and relax and not be so go all the time. So could you kind of walk us through a little bit more about this connection that we've got between, our gut and like what happens in our minds and our like day-to-day lives?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. So the one thing to know about the gut is that we produce around 90% of our serotonin, which is our good mood our good mood chemical. We produce that in the gut. So if the gut is not working very well, then you're not going to produce enough serotonin. So that's a really instant, obvious, you know, so it goes through your vagus nerve and your brain are the ones that talk to each other. And if you don't, so if your gut's not working well, you're not making enough serotonin. Therefore, it's a very simple step to go, okay, that might be why you've got low serotonin and have a low mood. Also from that, your serotonin, your melatonin, which is your sleep chemical, are very interlinked. And so if you're not making enough serotonin, you might not be making enough melatonin and you might not be sleeping very well. Then you're tired, then you feel lower. You see, so then this cycle kicks in of like lethargy, depression, you know. So that's one really, really simple, sort of obvious one. And then the thing about the stress thing, it is really interesting. I've heard so many people saying, I feel better than I have ever felt. I'm like taking time, you know, I don't know if I can go back. You know, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. People are like, there is definitely a silver lining to this cloud. Yeah. And the stress thing, so stress is more to do with your adrenal glands. So your adrenals are they're glands that sit just up here. And they basically produce all your cortisol, and then when your cortisol runs out, it'll give you adrenaline, and then you're exhausted, and then you're, and then I tell you what that does do to your gut is that means that when you're like this, rushing, your gut is, when you're rushing, it's like parasympathetic, sympathetic, and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is your rest and digest, which is what we should be doing when we sit, chew our food, digest our food, absorb the nutrients, use those nutrients. Sympathetic is the stress one, where we're like, it literally shuts our digestion down, literally. So when we're putting more food in our mouth, but our nervous system is going, we're not digesting that, we're just going to either not digest it or, you know, not break it down properly. So then you've probably got issues with absorbing the right nutrients. So then that will in turn make you feel more tired. And, you know, so that, I mean, all the systems are really linked together. Obviously, from functional medicine point of view, you would treat everything. But that I definitely see people are taking more time to eat and taking more time to do exercise, and, you know, and their cortisol levels are down and they're feeling better.
Yeah. So it's almost like if you're eating really, really well, say, but you're living the most hectic lifestyle of all, it's almost going to like negate.
Yeah. So I have a lot of alpha clients. Those people, you know, they do yoga at 6 and then they walk the dogs at 7 and then they're going to do this and this. And then they're like, and then, you know, and then at like 10 o'clock at night, they're going, but I'm tired at 10. And you're like, of course you're tired, you're exhausted, you go to bed, you know, but they want more and more and more out of their body. But actually the problem is that because they're not taking any time to just rest and digest, they're probably disrupting their absorption, and therefore like it's counterproductive basically.
So this is so interesting to me, because I've noticed, I feel like I literally have noticed a change in my body. And because I've always been somebody that ate pretty much all plant-based, you know, really, I thought I was doing all the right things, but the difference I've felt in the past few weeks, just not waking up with this like crushing weight of like, because I'm sort of that person. I think like you know, running REV, you've got to be like quite disciplined. I also want to work out. I want to see my friends, and the expectations of what we as human beings are supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis. It's really crazy.
And also it's getting more and more and more, and the expectation, and actually, you know, the thing with social media and just smartphones in general, and that connectivity all the time, we don't ever switch off. I know that when I get a taxi, sometimes when I'm driving from appointment to appointment, I'm like, oh damn it, I shouldn't have driven, because it means that I can't do my in between appointments. And, you know, so even when you have 5 minutes to take a breath, you fill it up with, you know, the phone or, you know, emails or whatever it is. And we are expected to do more. We expect more and more and more and more of ourselves. And it's funny, my mum said that to me once. And, you know, when you, like the older generation, have that perspective, she was like, not only do you do all this exercising, work, but then you expect to have kids, and then you expect to have a social life on top of that. Like, she was just like, that just didn't happen when she was young. She was like, you just did what you had to do, or whatever, you know. Anyway, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true, we want a lot.
It is true. And I do find that speaking to my mother, because she's like, I just don't know how you do it. Like, and I don't even have kids, you know, and it's like, but we put so much pressure on ourselves. And have you found a way personally to kind of, I mean, obviously it's easier in this moment, but have you found any sort of helpful tactics, let's say, to kind of put that pressure off of yourself? Do you think that like living in the country helps? Are you still guilty of it? Like, you know, is there any way of, I don't know, like creating some more discipline for ourselves?
I'll tell you what I did do. Living in the country does help on one, but you know what, I have to commute. So when I'm working, I'm up at 5. You know, it's a different stressor. You know, and it's also like going to bed knowing you've got to get up, get out, get to London. So I tell you what I did do is I stopped drinking for a while. I do drink, but you know, I used to like a really big night out, and that taking that pressure out made a huge difference to me. So like, you know, see your friends. This is for me personally. See your friends, go for dinner, but just not drinking at all. You know, it was a nice change actually, and that really helped for a while. Oh, it really does help actually when I'm in that like frantic. I feel like I can do more. You know, I literally just, my brain doesn't have that like cloudiness. So that was one thing. I also, things that I do that help my energy levels is intermittent fasting. I find really useful. And I suppose, you know, what's interesting about this time is you suddenly realize that the world's not going to fall apart. Your world is, you know, I mean, this huge seismic shift has happened, yet we're all working out ways to carry on, you know, with our work, and it's at a slower pace. So I suppose this is a learning curve for everybody, you know, for me too, because I'm not very good. My friend says I have nuclear energy, you know, it's like go, 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 go. But, you know, so I think going to bed, I mean, for me, going to bed early and not having late nights, because if I have a late night, it lasts for 4 days. It knocks me out for 4 days. So it's not just the late night, it's, you know, so that was for me, but that's also because I'm 45. And as you get older, it's really annoying. You start going, I can't do it anymore.
I mean, I'm 32 and I feel that way. So I don't even know, you know, it's like, I think and sleep is something that I'm really interested in too, in terms of, you know, I'm trying really hard to be very disciplined about not bringing my phone into bed. And I mean, but like something that simple, you'd think, but it's almost like we're so addicted that just like leaving my phone upstairs seems really wrong.
I know, it's really hard, isn't it? And also I do it for 3 days and then it creeps back in, and then I don't know. But you're right. I mean, you know, sleep is I keep saying it, is like my 2020 mission. It's not my mission is sleep, but I think there seems to be a collective move to understanding that actually sleep, it's not about sleep when you're dead or you only live once, you know, who needs more than 4 hours sleep. I think there's definitely, I can feel in my field, there's definitely a movement towards going how important sleep is, and understanding that actually you need, if you're not getting your REM sleep, you're not clearing out your brain, like the plasticity of your brain literally physically is not getting cleaned out. So, you know, so there's definitely an understanding of, and I think you'll hear more and more about sleep as we go on. I think we're just starting to understand how important it is. And then everybody who can't sleep gets really stressed because they're like, oh my God, but I can't sleep, but I, you know. But anyway, but I think, you know, and actually, you know, anyway, so I think that's important. It's quite an interesting new wave of stuff going on there.
Yeah. Well, kind of moving on to sort of those things that I've noticed too, like being in the center of London right now, the clearing of pollution, I've just noticed it's almost like the fog that I had in my head, and just like it was almost like being enveloped in all of this pollution was really affecting my mood. And I've always wondered about that too, you know, from the pollution in the air to the things that we have in our water to pesticides in our food, you know, how I'm really curious about this, and I think it's really important for people to know and understand more about, like, how do the toxins in sort of like our environs affect our health, and how important is it to try and distance ourselves from them and like clean up our lives a little bit for our health.
Okay, so the thing about environmental pollutants are you can't really control them. So even though I live in the middle of a field, but I know that the pollutants around me, actually, you know, the pollutants around, you can sort of say, I live in the country, it's fine, but you're surrounded by people pesticiding their fields constantly, you know, so where you think, you know, I mean, there's so many cases, there are many cases, aren't there, where there are clusters of cancer cases where they've been spraying, you know, in the 70s where there was, you know, I don't know if you've heard of those cases, you know, where they were spraying with God knows what. And nobody would ever think about it because they're in the countryside. But there are pesticides, there are pollutants everywhere in London or in the city. Obviously, it's, you know, clear, you can see the smog. But I think first of all is not to beat yourself up, that, you know, and not to stress out, because it's, the body can deal with a lot. The liver can deal with a lot. It's incredible. What does it do? It goes through 1.5 liters of blood a minute, or something insane like that. 1.5 liters of blood, but I feel like it's 1.5 liters per minute. I think it does, of blood, or maybe even more. Anyway, it's something insane. It filters and filters and filters. It's constantly battling and detoxifying the stuff that is around you. So I think being aware of that is great, and understanding that is what your body does all the time. But then I think helping support that is really important. I think we can definitely do that, because obviously with all the car traffic and and all the pesticides that are on the food and in the air, that's more than our bodies had to deal with before. And I know people get their knickers in a real twist about the term detoxificate. If I'm detoxing, people are like, don't, you can't say detoxing, your body does it all the time. It does. But the idea that we are fighting a higher toxic load than ever before I think makes it possible to understand that we should actually support our bodies a little bit more than we were before to help combat it. So, I think, looking at your liver is really good. So eating lots of green veg, for example, making sure you've got enough B vitamins in there, making sure you've got, so glutathione is the mother of all antioxidants. So you can support that with, lots of fresh antioxidant type foods, or you can supplement it with I'd always use a liposome or glutathione to try it. So that's your stage 1, and then make sure you're eating lots of fiber to help with phase 2, which is the elimination of it out of your body. So that's what you need. You need to make sure you support phase 1 detoxification with the liver with lots of fresh green veg, and phase 2, or not fresh green, there's lots. Just make sure you're getting loads of nutrients, and then phase 2 is more about making sure you get it out of the body
with like good fiber sources. What are your top 3 good fiber sources?
Well, I think kale's great. If anyone's tried to eat kale that isn't well massaged and cooked, I know it's quite vibrant. Things like, the brassicas are great because they've got a really nice indole. They've got I3 carb and I3C in them. So they're really nice. They've got lots of lovely things in them. They're very fibrous. Fibre is in, fibrous bread, which is slightly tougher, so cabbages and stuff, but also nuts and seeds. And you can get it in carbs. Porridge has got nice brown rice, white rice, not white rice, basmati rice. Yeah.
All right, so fiber is a good one. I'll remember that. So moving on to kind of the idea of sustainability in food, which obviously at REV, that's something that is mega for us. So do you feel like your mentality towards food has changed in, say, the last, I'd say, 5 years, as this conversation of, I think we're starting to realize how huge the impact is of the food we eat. And I think, there is a lot of conversation that I've been hearing about, the fact that COVID-19 has stemmed from really irresponsible meat production, and we are cutting down the rainforest and literally like cutting down our lungs in order to produce tons of red meat that, isn't even really done that well in terms of protein and stuff. So how would you say that your sort of take on the food that you're eating has been influenced by growing environmental concerns?
Well, I think the sustainability thing is I suppose it's shifted completely what you eat. It's taken away what you want to eat to what you should eat, I think, is a big change. So I was talking to someone about Nutella yesterday, and because we were talking about palm oil, because it's got palm oil in it. And so Nutella say that palm oil, I looked on their website, and Nutella say that palm oil there is 100% sustainable. So it's just interesting that is the first thing it says on its website, is it's sustainable. And it just shows you, so I suppose things like quinoa I think that was one of the first ones that you started going, oh, it's not sustainable. And you started hearing bad comment about the trading, of the people who grew it compared to the people who bought it. And I suppose that's where, I feel responsible. I feel a responsibility I'd say that's definitely a decision that is made when I'm shopping. I think things like avocados are really hard, and almonds are really hard because you want them, but you also know that actually you're not doing a service to the planet by buying them constantly, And I think actually the other thing, when it comes to meat, so I'm not vegan, I eat meat. I have in my house 1 pescatarian, 2 meat eaters, me and my daughter, one of my daughters, one daughter is vegetarian, one is pescatarian, and my husband is vegan. So we have the whole bloody lot. And I'm not anti-meat as long as it's well sourced and it's, and it's, I prefer it if it's local. But you know what, if we ate less meat in the same way that we should eat less avocados and stuff, the world would be it would be a healthier place. It would be a much healthier place. I'm not anti-meat, but you know what, eat it once or twice a week, not 5 times a day or 3 times a day. People.
Yeah, exactly. And would you say that, I know we were kind of talking about it before, but in terms of sort of a general ethos of how to eat sustainably, you were talking about really like local for you is the big thing. And also it's an interesting, I think, time, because I feel like just by default, a lot of us are going to more local food sources. But can you talk a little bit about why you think that's so important, just eating locally?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because of, the supermarket, sort of free for all. And so I know that and also supporting my local businesses, like the local butchers, and there's a local cafe that's delivering fruit and veg that's locally sourced. And, for me, from a nutrition point of view, I'd rather eat something that was picked down the road, that was picked yesterday down the road or 2 days ago down the road and is now on my plate, rather than something that was picked in, Argentina and flown, and the vitamin quality, the nutrient quality of that is going to be so much lower than the thing that's locally sourced. So that on its own, from a nutrition point of view, buying locally is much, much better.
Yeah. And I also think that this is where it gets a bit tricky, because it's like, okay, do I go for the organic blueberries from Argentina, or do I go for like the non-organic apple that's picked down the road?
Well, I think I would say go for the non-organic apple down the road. Definitely. I would always say that. You know what? I also, do you know, when it comes to berries, because berries are one of the things that everybody wants, buy frozen berries. I understand they don't sprinkle as nicely frozen berries, but if they're for smoothies, or even if they're to mix into porridge or whatever, buy frozen, because you can buy local that was frozen in season last year. And, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. But yeah, definitely apple down the road, always. And wash it.
Good. Well, that's good to know. But would you say, in terms of like, I feel like something that we're very aware of is the fact that organic food is more expensive. And for a lot of people, they probably would love to eat that way, but the price difference, like as we've talked about, it is really mega. So would you say there are just certain foods that if you were gonna go organic, like there are certain foods that you're like, you know what, these ones you should really try to eat more organic, whereas these ones, not so bad if you can't kind of swing it?
So yeah, I definitely, I think fruit and veg, if you can't afford organic, just wash them. Really make sure you wash them really, really well. Things with the skin on are better, because you can peel them.
Yeah.
And take it off. Things like spinach leaves are really a pain in the neck, because they've been sprayed to shit. Basically, they've been sprayed and sprayed and sprayed and sprayed and sprayed. So really, really soak them. I would probably soak them for a while. So that's how you get around those. But the things that I would definitely try and spend money, I would definitely, if I could, would be eggs. I would buy organic eggs, organic dairy, and I would buy organic meat. I tell you what though, organic meat isn't good enough. It has to be organic, free range, locally sourced, and grass reared if possible, or whatever, whatever the animal you're buying was meant to be eating. So that's what I would say.
And why, just out of curiosity, because I'm vegetarian, but I do love an egg. Why would you say eggs are so important for being kind of, because, I've always noticed that it is crazy when you so I'm getting some deliveries from Spring Restaurant, because I had Sky on the podcast. I love her. So I'm trying to support Fern Barrow and what they're doing down there. But, when you crack open an egg that has come from Fern Barrow versus one that you might get in just a generic supermarket, I mean, the difference in the color of the yolk is like crazy. It's like the one from Spring is literally almost bright orange. And then the one that I've gotten in the supermarket, or when you go out, you can notice it's like a dull yellow.
Yeah, I mean, it's often to do with what they're being fed. So so the quality. It's like you can get corn-fed chickens which are yellow. It can be to do with what they're being fed. So, but I mean, when it comes to animal produce and it not being organic, I worry about the antibiotics. That's what I worry about. So whereas a leaf of spinach might have pesticides on it, which you can wash off, if the chicken that has produced your egg has been given antibiotics, then there'd be antibiotics in that, traces of it, or hormones. They're given lots of hormones and stuff. That's why I worry that the produce of anything from an animal I would always buy organic.
And that's really interesting, and something actually I wasn't going to ask you about, but now I want to, because I think this is so important. I don't think people quite realize the extent of like what we're putting in these animals and how that is. I mean, first of all, just the inhumanity of it is heartbreaking. But then how is that affecting us? You know, like what does it mean when a cow has been given tons of antibiotics and then we eat the meat from that cow?
Yeah, I mean, and also actually, just to be clear, the other thing that's a bit fooling about organic is you think it hasn't been given anything, but you can get organic hormones and organic antibiotics. So, you know, so it's not that they're perfect, but they're better. But yeah, so the problem is that when we eat those things, you know, obviously there are hormones can have a hormonal effect on us. But also the antibiotics, they go in and they add to our toxic load, which is already high enough. We don't need any more antibiotics or chemicals. You know, we literally take on board those chemicals from those animals. So we really don't need any more. Thank you very much. We don't, you know, and I sort of, I don't know. Yeah, we take sort of like we take on any medication they've had, and it just slows us down, and it's something else that we have to then detoxify.
Yeah. All right. So basically organic meat, organic dairy, those are kind of like number one tips for that. So I feel like, you know, and we were having this conversation, I think it's so important, like that right now, I think a lot of people are thinking about their immunity and their immune systems. But what we were kind of talking about before is actually you don't really want to get to a point where there is a virus going around, or, you know, say it's even normal flu season, or, you know, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but there's a second wave of COVID-19, which of course they're saying is very much an option. So is it really, you know, not so much about just doing this sort of really reactive way of being like, okay, now I have to build up my immune system, literally eat vitamins, you know, do all the things now that I'm supposed to be doing? Or is now the time that you would say we need to be building up our immune systems in the best possible way to move forward so that it's not so reactive? You know, because I feel like so many people are like, okay, what do I do now for immunity? But is it the case that we needed to be working on our immunity for much longer than this to have it actually be effective?
Your immune system works. Again, it's on you. It's working for you all the time. It's, you know, it's battling all the time. Literally, you're surrounded by viruses and bacteria all the time, all day, and so your immune system is constantly battling that. So I tell you, so if you are somebody who gets sick all the time, then you're probably someone whose immune system needs work. You know, you probably need to start looking at that, and you know, you need to, and that's a long-term thing. It's not sort of like a quick fix. You take some high-dose vitamin C and you're fine. It's a long-term thing, and probably goes back to the gut. And also things like, you know, other telltale signs of an immune system that's not quite right are things like you know, autoimmune, you know, so psoriasis type, well, autoimmune, it can be anything. It can be lupus, it can be, you know, but if you have an autoimmune conditions or several autoimmune conditions, then you probably need to look at balancing your immune system too. And reacting to something when you've got a virus, it's probably too late. I mean, I would do high dose vitamin C if I can feel something coming on. But really, it comes back to the gut and having that broad, you know, that rainbow of food every day, where, you know, and that broad nutrient intake that your gut loves, and that will help the bugs in your gut will help fight whatever comes your way. And that's a lifetime. That's kind of like a way. What do they call it? It's a lifestyle choice. You know, it's a lifestyle thing. That's what you know. It's sort of an ongoing taking care of yourself.
And something that we'd spoken about that I think is really interesting is that REV, I've seen like our fitness section just go mental, which is amazing. And it makes me really happy. But exercise, something that we kind of mentioned before, you know, how important would you say that is? Because I don't think we often think that exercise and immunity are so linked.
So I think, so exercise is really good because it releases the endorphins, and it also makes you fitter. So you are physically fitter. The other thing that I was saying about exercise for me is that it helps you. It's another one of those little steps. So that gets you into, you know, I feel like when I'm doing it, if I start doing a little bit of exercise and I haven't done any and I'm like, I don't want to do it, then I do a little bit. I feel much more like eating something with kale in it. Then, you know, I feel much more eating, not kale, it doesn't have to be, but I feel like eating healthier. I feel like taking more care of myself. And I think that those are all the little bricks that you have to put in place to make sure that you are operating at your at your optimum, as well as things like meditation, which is something that goes against the grain for everybody who's like, go, 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 got to get to the gym. You know, you need to start putting all these little bricks in place for wellness, and that takes a bit of time. And I think exercise is part of that for me.
Yeah. So in terms of building out this, you know, this idea of, say, for people watching and they're like, you know what, now is the time. I'm inspired to take better care of myself, build up my immunity, you know, come out the other side of this better. Would you just have like maybe your top 3 tips for somebody who's like, I kind of want to do, you know, a lifestyle change, but, you know, also in a sustainable way, not just for the environment, but a sustainable way in that, you know, you're going to do it for years to come, versus like, I know for me, I really hate smoothies. Like, I just can't get on. And it's weird. I'm American. I go to California a lot, like, you know, but I cannot, like, I really can't. Like, so, you know, but I don't want to feel guilty because I don't love a smoothie. And that's just not a sustainable way for me to like maintain my own health and wellness. So what are like 3 just really easy steps you would almost say for anyone to kind of just get going to becoming a more well person, you know?
I mean, I definitely think meditate, and I'm not good at meditating, but I definitely think meditation, when I do it, it's just gives me a breath before I start my day to go, okay. And actually, I really, I literally manage to do it 2, maybe times a week. But I do, because I don't do it the rest of the time, I really notice the difference.
Yeah.
And then something else I would really do is cold showers, like hot. You can do a hot for, and then a cold. That's really good for your immune system. Actually, that really gets your lymph moving, so it's really useful for your immune system. So you can do a hot shower for 30 seconds, cold for 10, and do that 3 times, or you can just build up to having a 2-minute cold shower. It's a really great way to start your day. It's brilliant for your immune system and many things. And then the other thing that I was going to say, and I don't know, this is a food thing. I mean, obviously eat more, as I, you know, it's not rocket science. Eat more fruit, eat more vegetables, eat more whole grains, eat more, eat better meat, better sourced meat, and make sure you're eating good fats, get your good fats in. And then sorry, this is much more than 3. There's something that I do really think is really useful to do, and I hope it's not too extreme, but intermittent fasting, where you basically do it 3 times a week, where you skip breakfast or dinner. So you have 2 meals that day, is really a fantastic way to keep reminding yourself to take care of yourself. I think more than anything, it really helps you go, oh yeah, I'm doing this because it's self-care. It's really good for your gut. It's great for your brain. It's fantastic. It's a brilliant maintenance thing that you can do for always. And I think doing it for your metabolism, doing it 3 days a week, you know, one off, one on, is a brilliant way to keep your metabolism going, keeping it, you know, like on its toes. And I'd say that's a really great thing to do now. So to maintain your, you know, sanity, and after. And I think it's a great thing to do after.
So just to be clear, so literally to intermittent fast, you would say it's not like, you know, going days without food, because, you know, I don't know if I could ever do that, but literally just by kind of skipping 1 meal, or just, you know, so like for instance, not having breakfast and going straight into lunch, like 2 days a week, that would count as intermittent fasting.
Yeah, so you do 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours on. So you fast from 8 till 12 the next day, 8 p.m. at night till 12 the next day, and then you can have lunch. You know, sensible lunch. It's not like donuts and beer at lunch. And then in the evening you have, you know, a sensible dinner, and then you go to, you know, and that would be an intermittent fast. I mean, there are lots of different ones. I like doing a liquid day once a week. That's but I can't intermittent fast every day, because also I change every day. I don't know how I'm going to feel. And so I find it's too restrictive for me, that, but doing it 3 days a week is really good. And then I love doing a liquid day, which would be a smoothie, juice, soup, a blended soup, another smoothie probably, and another soup, something like that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. I actually, a lot of days I just don't have time for breakfast. So I'm just going to call that intermittent fasting now and try and be responsible about it. So, all right. Second to last question for you, Rose. So I think, you know, I feel like right now I'm really interested in how people are kind of staying well and not so anxious, and really making the best of this time in terms of keeping their, you know, their mental health really strong. So would you say there's anything that you've been doing that you feel is really powerful, that's been keeping you feeling quite like optimistic and just good in this kind of very tumultuous time?
Exercise probably, again, you know, for my mood, exercise is really key. It makes me feel like I'm on top of it. It makes me feel, you know, like I've done something nice for myself. And even if that's walking, actually, I've got a bit of a, I did another marathon in another marathon. I did a marathon in November, and my knee's been a bit squeaky since then. So I do run still, but I've been walking loads. We've got dogs, so you know, and that's been really nice. And so I think exercise has been really key. And I mean, I love cooking. So creating something, and for me, that's cooking. That's been really good to do for me. You know, a bit of structure, I think, you know, so get up, do a bit of exercise and make some food has been quite important, because otherwise the days just seem to blend. But actually, yeah.
And I feel like it's such a nice time for people to start cooking, learning how to really prepare a meal. Like, I mean, I'm like setting the table for my husband and I to have lunch, which is like something very new. Like that was not a part of our lives before, but now it's like kind of taking every meal as though it were actually an occasion, which I think is kind of how we should treat eating.
Yeah. And we should be sitting down and chewing our food and taking time. And it should, you know, it's interesting actually, because I had, you know, I was having a conversation with someone about who eats really well. And he said there was this Italian guy at work who would have pasta, then his meat course, and then he would have his, you know, dolce, he would have some pudding. He said he had that every day. Yeah, everyone else was eating rabbit leaves, or, you know, lettuce leaves. And he was like, this guy was so healthy. I said, did he sit down and chew? And did he sit and have lunch? And he was like, yeah. And the rest of them were running around, like eating like bits of cucumber or whatever. And this guy was leaner, healthier, happier. And, you know, and I mean, that's obviously just one person, but we were laughing going, I bet you it's because he was in his parasympathetic nervous system. Oh. But I do think it's a really good time for people to cook. I've had so many brilliant messages from people going, oh my God, I'm cooking and it's so exciting, and sort of understanding it's not as hard as people think.
Yeah, well, that's a mega thing. So, all right, final question. Something that I'm so curious about. So what is, like, I feel like there are some really beautiful things that are coming out of this time. And I feel like a lot of us don't want to lose it. It was really interesting, actually. I was reading an article the other day that said like only 9% of Britons said that they wanted life to go back to the way that it was before. Like only 9%, with, like, you know, and obviously we want elements of life back. Of course, we want to see our loved ones. We want to go to, I really miss going to like galleries and stuff, but I'm probably one of those people that, you know, I don't want things to go necessarily back to the way they were. And for me, it's sort of like seeing London this clean. I mean, I haven't run in London in 6 years because I always figured I was doing more harm than good by all the pollution, the diesel cars. I mean, it was just bad. And now it's like the birds are chirping and the air is fresh. So for me, I'm like, okay, how do I cut down on my own carbon footprint to make sure that this doesn't go back to the way it was? But for you, is there something that you're doing now that you sort of are like, you know, this is the change that I want to see on the other side of this. This is something that I want to keep going and bring with me into the, you know, kind of post-COVID world, I'm calling it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, interestingly, I commute a lot and I'm always really aware. They did our carbon footprint. It was not good. And actually doing these Zoom meetings and Zoom calls and stuff has been a bit of I mean, I always used to do clinic anyway, sometimes with follow-ups when people couldn't come online. But I feel like that's really opened up a new way of communication, which when you don't live in a town or a city, you can do it remotely, which is really, really useful to me. And that would mean that, is, you know, when I think about my stress levels of having to be present at face-to-face in London every time, I would like to carry this on a bit more and just like not run myself ragged. And also, you know, the pollution thing is that we haven't been in our cars. I filled my car up with petrol once. I used to do it every week. This is 5 weeks, 6 weeks, once. So, you know, so that's a really, that is something that I've really thought about. It's like, gosh, you know, that crazy madness of having to be everywhere all the time. So that is something. And then doing my garden. I mean, I do my garden anyway, but I've really taken charge of the veg patch again, because I do it with you know, I get some help with the veg patch because it's quite difficult, or it's just quite time consuming, and I've really enjoyed having the time to do that, you know, because I'm doing it on my own now, so, and it's been quite nice. So I hope I can find time to do that after.
Yeah, well, those are two beautiful things. Well, thank you so much, Rose. This was really great, and I'll link everything below so people can come find you and learn more, and stay really well.
And you, thank you so much, Cora.
Thanks, Rose. Bye.